Well, a very good morning to you, or good evening, or wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Season 8 of the Public Relations Podcast for 2025. And I'm recording this in video for once because someone said to me last year, why don't you do videos anymore? Well, here we go. I'm going to present the podcast for this week, which is going on the normal audio feed. So if you're only hearing me, you're listening on the normal, on your podcast app, wherever it is, the way that most people listen to this show. But if you're on LinkedIn or on YouTube, then you can see my face at the moment. So it is amazing to think that this has been going for, 7 seasons now? Well, it must be 7 seasons. We're in season 8. And over that time, I guess we've explored hundreds of practical PR strategies, shared insights from dozens of experts, and grown a small but strong community of comms pros who are keen on moving PR into the new era, or PR-led marketing, as I like to refer to it as. And Season 8, I hope, is going to be taking this to a whole new level. So what have I got coming up for you just today alone, let alone what's coming up this year? Actually, I should mention, later in this week, I've got the first guest chat in a while, which I'm having with Andrew Healy, great guy from New York, does financial PR, and has got some really interesting ideas on how you approach that with the way the world's changing. That will be coming out later this week on both LinkedIn and on the audio podcast. But what have I got for you today in this video? 2 lightning-fast 10-second tips from previous guests, how changing 1 to 2 words can transform the impact of a message, a juicy comms conundrum, something you can participate in. How would you tackle this tough, full-blown reputation crisis for a university? A personal favourite of mine, the secret to momentum building in campaigns, why it's the difference between campaigns that fizzle and those that thrive, plus some practical steps to make it work for you. And, news of a live webinar as well that I'm thinking of doing. So anyway, loads of stuff. Let me dash through it because I don't want to hold you long. So, new in... also worth mentioning, in the Public Relations Podcast Premium, I've just added a brand new module to the Premium section, which is all about momentum building and how you can utilise political techniques in business or in your organisation to do that. If you're interested in that, then there is a link in the newsletter, or you can just go to the publicrelationspodcast.com and you will see a link there to the member section. Right, 2 10-second quick wins. If you're under attack on social media, before you panic, ask yourself this: are these bots? Rafi Mendelsohn, a recognized expert in social media crisis management from Cyabra, shared this invaluable tip a little while back in season 7. And that was, number 1, use bot detecting software if you can, if you've got access to that. If you can't, then look at the accounts that are making the comments and ask yourself, when were they created? Have they posted anything else? Because they often don't, and often just around this one topic. And do they have any actual engagement? Because if they don't, chances are it's a new account and it's a spam account. From there, you either want to be educating reporters about the real impact of what's happening with these bots, or focus on addressing the legitimate concerns, obviously. Second 10-second tip is, if you're drowning in bland PR campaigns, borrow some activist tricks. This was a tip from Jim McCarthy from Counterpoint Strategies, who recommended using simple but vivid imagery to describe what you're doing. So, for example, he said, instead of saying it's big, say it's 5 Empire State Buildings tall, to simplifying your examples without dumbing down. Clear, memorable language always sticks. Right, moving on to a question from a reader, and I've also got that comms conundrum still coming up, and also that piece about momentum as well, some thoughts on that. So first of all, a question from a reader, and this was how to make your classical music show stand out in his particular case. This was a presenter from a classical music radio show, recently asked for ideas about how to promote their program, and they reached out after seeing a post actually on LinkedIn where he talked about how small changes in words can make a big difference. They certainly did in newsrooms when I was doing that. And the presenter's show has this tagline that they were telling me: classics count, it's more than a radio show. They were saying, is this good? They also have a website to accompany their program, and the idea is to get people to there. I personally think the problem here is, the issue for me with this tagline is that it doesn't tell the audience why the show is unique. Here's how I'd approach it. Number 1, focus on the value. What is setting your show apart? And I think whatever campaign you're doing here, you need to be thinking about this. If you're trying to be generic, it doesn't work. So what is setting it apart? At the moment, the tagline says it's more than a radio show. It's a bit too vague. So you want to be specific. Are you telling the untold stories behind classical music? Are you playing rare pieces of music? Are you highlighting forgotten composers? So your tagline should communicate this. So, for example, classics count, the stories behind the music you love, giving us an idea about what we're going to get from this. The next step, of course, is to know your audience. Who is listening? Are they enthusiasts, craving deep knowledge, or casual listeners seeking relaxation? What is their motivation for being there? Once you know who your audience really is, you can then craft a message that resonates with them better. It's about making it a little bit different. Small changes in the wording, as I was saying in that original LinkedIn post, can have a big impact in your messaging. If you've got a question, by the way, for the podcast, and I'm very happy to share my own thoughts and also to bring in all the thoughts of all the great guests that I've had on the show, because this is one of the things I love about this show, is kind of bringing together all these great ideas and hopefully helping me in the stuff I do, and helping you and helping everyone share ideas amongst the comms world. What makes a pitch succeed? When you're pitching to someone, whether it's an influencer, whether a journalist or whatever, what actually makes it succeed or fail? I've seen a lot of examples of what makes a pitch succeed or fail, and I often get asked as an ex-journalist what I wish people had sent me. So I'm considering hosting a webinar on this. If you are interested, then I've put some times for this in the newsletter this week, and I'd love to know if you're interested. Do let me know. Just reply to that newsletter and let me know if you'd like to. I've put some times in there, and I'll add some links to the website and other stuff as well to make sure that everyone gets those dates so that you can show interest if you would like to take part in that. Completely free, of course. Right, let's talk about our focus topic for this week, and this is building momentum. Question for you. Are your campaigns falling flat? Have you ever felt like your campaigns and your announcements are like shouting into the void? You post, you advertise and pitch, but it feels like every effort stands alone, like pushing a boulder up a hill only for it to roll back down when the next campaign starts. The thing is, it doesn't need to be like that. You could be building momentum, especially if you're in an in-house comms pro role, because you can stretch things out a bit more over time. The trap of one-off marketing is that, and that some people fall into, is that treating campaigns as one-offs, and then you have, for example, a product to promote this week, a new idea next week, and whatever the latest initiative is from the stakeholders telling you what their latest great idea is this week. And each effort feels like you're starting from scratch each time. And the issue isn't necessarily the quality of the campaigns that you're running, it's the lack of connection between them. Without that continuity, your audience has to warm up each time to your message every single time, and that's exhausting for you and for them. By building on a single core message over time, each new effort compounds results that last. So instead of competing for attention from a cold audience, you're engaging with people who are already primed, who are already a little bit warmer. It's just like a salesperson going into a sales pitch. It's far easier to pitch to someone who's already a little bit warmed up to you. With a lot of traditional advertising, it relies on repetition to hammer a single simple message into your audience's mind. But if that message doesn't resonate, no amount of repetition is going to save it. People are going to tune out. Whereas momentum-driven campaigns take a different approach. Instead of shouting the same identical thing over and over again, you tell new stories that reinforce the same core idea. So the delivery is fresh, but the message remains consistent. It's a conversation. It's not a lecture. It's PR-led marketing at its best. And this approach isn't just for big budgets as well. Even small teams can achieve much better results by doing this strategically. Some of the best examples of momentum-building campaigns come from the world of politics. And as I say, I saw a lot of this when I was working in political comms and as a journalist. In politics, it's very hard to rely on one big splash, because getting the media, getting influencers, getting anyone to just simply say one message aloud so that it dominates the headlines is almost impossible. Unlike when you're paying for advertising on a massive scale, and even then, it's really hard to these days. As I say, this is one of the problems. If you've got enormous budgets, it's still really hard. So what you do in politics is you take the smaller wins and you just keep compounding them. You keep building that message and gaining a few points each time and amplifying each one to add to that. You use small victories to create that sense of inevitable momentum. And these same principles can apply to business as well. And you don't see a lot of people doing this. So let's give you a few examples. For example, so with political parties, they might leverage defections, highlighting people switching sides from one party to another to create a sense of movement and social proof. And there's no difference here than highlighting new customers switching from your competitors, or people who are just discovering what you're doing for the first time. You can turn small wins into big deals. This is something that in politics happens as well. They'll look for even the smallest tiny victory and make it sound like it's huge. I've seen this more recently. There was a campaign going on, there was an election going on whereby they were hoping to achieve a lot more, achieved a lot less, but still made it sound like it was a grand movement forward. There's another one, which is mirroring larger trends. So this is where you position yourself as part of an unstoppable wave, often going on around the world or somewhere, that isn't actually really connected with what you're doing, but suggests, and perhaps could be connected with what you're doing, but it kind of implies that there is this momentum going on. And then, of course, there's always the underdog story. People love rooting for a challenger who's shaking things up, bringing something new to the market or bringing something new to politics. And people tend to like the new thing because it's hard to accuse them of what they did in the past because they haven't really done so much in the past. So what should you do? As always, if you're approaching this, you should be starting with your core message. Everything begins obviously with defining your core message. And once you have that, crafting new angles around that. Whether highlighting defections or mirroring larger trends or amplifying small wins, each piece of content should deliver a fresh take on that same core idea. I mean, the advantage of this, as I say, is that this approach has the advantage of resonating with lots of different people as well. Because you're using multiple different angles, you're not just trying to find one angle which resonates with this generic big audience. You're approaching it from lots of different ways, but there's always an intersection between the different niches within that core target audience that you're trying to reach. So the point is that momentum can be generated proactively. Often people kind of go, oh, it's just this organic thing. It might happen, it might not. But by building deliberately on things, you're gently chipping away until it starts to build that compounding effect. Now, if you'd like to dive deep into this, I've created a full guide on momentum building in the Public Relations Podcast Premium, and the module's got, I think it's about 8 or 9 different specific strategies that I've got in there. All of this, I try to do so much of this stuff for free, but all of this is designed to basically just pay for hosting and pay for all the bits and pieces I need to do for and the software platforms that I use to help me create this podcast. So it's all just very cheap if you'd like to join that one. Right, finishing off with the comms conundrum for this week, the PR challenge of the week. What would you do in this particular case? You are managing a crisis for a national university, and you are managing communications for them. They're a prestigious university. But they're embroiled in this controversy after it's revealed that a professor plagiarized key parts of a widely publicized research paper. And alumni and current students are outraged, claiming the university's reputation for academic excellence is at stake. The professor has resigned, but the scandal is gaining traction with demands for a stronger response from the administration. As always with the Comms Conundrum on the Public Relations Podcast, you can choose just one of 2 options. You have to pick between them, and that's part of the challenge here. Do you, number 1, publish a comprehensive statement which admits institutional failure in oversight, announce a thorough review of all published research, and introduce stricter policies for academic integrity led by a well-respected external committee? Or do you deflect focus with positive PR, highlighting the university's recent untainted achievements like groundbreaking discoveries and awards through a sort of positive PR blitz across the channels, avoiding further discussion of the incident? So do you, in quotes, come clean and say, we made a mistake and we're going to fix it? Or do you really try and move the story on? So what I would do, this is my opinion. I think one of the great things about this is it really provokes debate. I love the comments I get on LinkedIn from you about this. I think the problem that you face with option 1 is that admitting institutional failures is likely to harm the university's reputation even further and could erode trust from donors and prospective students, potentially for the next 1-2 academic years, if not more. However, the narrative already feels entrenched. If the professor has resigned and the pressure continues, is still continuing, addressing the issue openly becomes kind of unavoidable. Now, the issue with option 2 is that while it focuses on damage control and shifting public attention to positive achievements, no one wants to hear about that at this point. This approach would certainly be necessary later, but given the urgency, I think it's, in this case, you have no choice but to kind of come clean, to try and kill this story. Now, one concern I have about option 1 is that it risks keeping the story alive longer, which could then harm, as I say, the next academic year, especially if the story might be about to naturally fizzle out. But what we've already said in the scenario is that this story somehow has got entrenched and it keeps getting repeated. So ideally, I think, like all of us, we'd recommend a mix of options as always, but we have to choose one, so I think I would go for option 1. What would you do, though? I would be fascinated to hear. You can always reach out to me, direct message me on LinkedIn, or by replying to the email that you got in the newsletter. What do you think? What would you do in that situation? Don't forget you can reach out to me. I love to get your questions. I love to hear from you. I love to hear what you're up to. I want to get you on the show as well. Whatever campaigns you are doing, don't be shy. I love hearing from you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there. It's Richard Midson if you're listening to the audio version. Midson, Midson. Connect with me there. We can talk about what you're up to. And as I say, I'd love to get you on the show as well. Welcome to 2025. Let's see what we can do this year, huh?